Welcome back once again to Recovery Coast to Coast, the only program in America on the air 5 nights a week, 2 hours a night, talking about addiction with a focus on recovery. Great to have you with us tonight. I'm Neil Scott. We're here till midnight tonight, and a very special hour tonight. We're going to be talking about an amazing production that is being done right now in New York City, but it will eventually be on tour around the country. I believe in what I call God incidences. They're not coincidences, they're God incidences. While in New York City for a speaking engagement at the National Publicity Summit, I just come back from a run in Central Park and I checked my Facebook account. And a very dear friend of mine, Eve Ruff, who has co-hosted with me in the past and is a much-respected addiction professional, she'd posted about a world premiere of a new production about wilderness treatment. Now, we've had a number of people on over the years on Recovery Coast to Coast dealing with wilderness treatment. It's fascinating. It's effective. The production is called Wilderness, and it was in New York City. So I sent a quick email to the treatment program that inspired the production, Evoke Therapy Programs. And within an hour or so, I was winding my way down to the East Village to a place called the Abrams Art Center, where I was mesmerized by the reality that was portrayed by a company of talented actors, including 6 adolescents who grabbed a hold of my heart and simply wouldn't let go for 90 minutes of real, and I do mean real. It weaves together the stories of hurt and healing with rare screen cut-ins from actual parents, very brave parents, I might add, and it was tied together very nicely with some truly wonderful folk music that really amplified the experience. Joining us in this segment is Anne Hamburger. She is the executive producer of Wilderness and of the production company, Engard Arts, and she has a long and illustrious career in the theatrical community. She's adjunct faculty for the graduate theater program at Columbia University. More importantly than her credits, which are many, she's a mom whose child went through treatment at the Wilderness program at Evoke Therapy Programs just outside of St. George, Utah. She and 5 other brave families decided to share their process on the back roads of recovery, sharing what Anne called generosity of spirit. Anne, welcome to Recovery Coast to Coast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
It's a delight to have you. The program is being world premiered in New York. It's a wonderful production, but I'd like you to take me back to the beginning and how this all started for Anne.
The beginning was I have twins, and my son really was suffering. He was struggling with depression, anxiety. He had learning issues.
How old was he at that time, Anne?
Well, this has been going on for quite some time, but it really escalated to a crisis level when he was 16. And I really felt that the school that he was attending really failed him. And I think a lot of the schools fail kids with learning issues that also then become commingled with emotional issues. And it got to the point where no matter, we had tried therapists and tutors, and nothing was working, and we got to the point where we really just couldn't reach him and didn't know what to do, and were very concerned about his emotional health, and decided to perform the intervention that took him to Bend, Oregon, and the wilderness therapy program that at the time was called Second Nature and is now called Evoke. He spent 11 weeks there, and the only way we communicated with him was through letters and talking to his therapist. He then went on to a residential therapeutic boarding school, done a boarding school, and now I'm happy to say he decided to get better, and he's happily in college. So I feel very lucky as a mom. But what led me to create a piece of theater about this was it was really the most profound experience I'd ever been through in my life as a parent, to have to face the fact that my son needed more help than I could provide, and to have to do something this dramatic. I never would have imagined. And it led me to become curious about what was going on with other families, because there's tremendous shame and secrecy and isolation around mental health issues that affect so many families across America. And just on Friday morning in the New York Times was an article that talked about the fact that there are more adolescents now dying of suicide than they are from traffic accidents.
Yeah.
And so we have a huge problem in this country people aren't talking about it. And through the creation of this piece of theater, Wilderness, not only do we put the stories of 6 very different kids and their families on stage, but we also really use the theater as a catalyst for creating community and stimulating conversation and breaking down that isolation and shame that so many people feel.
Anne Hamburger joining us tonight on Recovery Coast to Coast, executive producer of Wilderness. It is currently playing in New York. It'll play through November 20th. Then it will go out on the road. It's powerful. It's poignant. The New York Times did a great piece on it, which you can probably find by Googling New York Times and Wilderness. Tell me about the audiences. Have they been made primarily of people who have a passion for treatment, or people who are connected with the mental health movement, or are they just theater goers who are just blown away by the experience?
Well, the name of my company is On Guard Arts, spelled ENGARDE Arts. And at the center of the mission of everything I do is to bring people together who aren't normally in conversation. So our audiences actually consist of theater goers, people who just love to see good theater, but it also consists of people who are specifically affected by the issues at hand. So NYU organized a group of 200 undergraduates to come in, and that was followed by a panel conversation. And for instance, on the 13th of November, we have noted author and LGBT activist Andrew Solomon, author of Noonday Demon and Far From the Tree, coming in and doing a post-performance panel conversation.
Nice.
And Brad Reedy from Evoke Therapy is coming back to do a panel conversation on the 16th, Wednesday the 16th. And we really have tried to bring in as broad a cross-section of therapists, mental health workers, heads of schools as possible so that we can organize as many post-panel conversations as we can, so that people can actively engage in conversation after they've seen the show. So it has a very broad demographic. It's everybody from college students to moms and dads with troubled kids who are trying to figure out what to do, to people just interested in the theater. It's not just for one generation or one kind of person. It's for people who don't normally come together to come together.
Anne Hamburger joining us on Recovery Coast to Coast, executive producer of Wilderness and of the production company Engard Arts. You can find out more about this wonderful production by going to Engard, ENGARDE, arts.org. The balance, Anne, between telling the truth and getting the stories right and maintaining anonymity and not exploiting these struggling families. Talk about that process for you.
Well, when I first got in touch with Brad Reedy about wanting to do this piece, we built up a relationship over the past 2 years that now is one that's filled with trust. And Brad sent out letters to his families anonymously, and I got barraged, actually, with people who responded to me saying, I want to tell my story, I want to tell my story. And in developing this piece with my collaborator, Seth Boakley, we really just wanted to be as honest as possible, portraying the complexities of struggles with mental health. It's not a black or white situation. There's not a day in which somebody is all of a sudden magically cured. It's a process. And it's not only a process for kids and the people that go into this program, it's a process for parents too, because the whole family dynamic needs to change when you have a struggling young adult or adolescent. And I ended up interviewing all of these families, the parents and the kids, on Skype.
Wow.
And recording those interviews. And it was made very clear to them that we wanted to use this publicly, and we only used the stories of families that were interested in sharing their stories publicly. And these families wanted to do that because they felt that by sharing their stories and talking about their journey, they could help others. And as you know from seeing the show, each story is fundamentally different from one another. That It's about drug addiction. It's about computer addiction. It's about depression. It's about bullying. It's about not feeling accepted because you're different from other people. So there's a lot of different issues involved in the show that all conspire to make people feel unaccepted, depressed, and anxiety-ridden. And then what is that process that enables people to begin to heal, to begin to get better? And my personal experience is that the Wilderness Therapy Program was very effective in helping my son to start to learn coping skills and to start to understand consequences. And nature has consequences. You don't put up your tarp at night and it rains, you're going to get wet.
Yeah.
So it is not a cure-all. I don't think the production presents it as such. I do think as 21st century American families have gotten, many of us have gotten very disconnected from nature, very dependent on social media and technology in ways that are troubling and that need to be looked at.
You went through part of the program, did you not?
Well, the director and my co-author and I went out to the wilderness for a week for field research. And we visited 2 boys groups and 1 girls group. And we slept out there with them and participated in the therapeutic groups. And it was instrumental in our developing the piece in an honest and forthright way. Because even though as a parent, I went through having my own son go out to a wilderness therapy program, it gave me a whole new level and understanding of what that process was like by seeing the experience firsthand a year later with other kids. And then the New York Times feature writer, Laura Collins Hughes, also came out with us at a later date where she then wrote her feature in the New York Times based on coming out and sleeping with us under the stars and seeing what it was like.
Wow, amazing. Anne Hamburger joining us on Recovery Coast to Coast, executive producer of Wilderness. Again, you can find out about the production by going to engardarts.org. It's ENGARDE arts.org. It is being premiered in New York City. It's powerful, and like I say, it's very, very poignant. Let me ask you this, Anne. How is your son doing today, and what has his reaction been to the finished production?
My son's doing great. He's in college. He's at SUNY Binghamton. When the New York Times decided to do a feature on the show, I went to him and I asked him if he would mind being interviewed. At first, I was a little uncertain about whether or not that was a good idea. And then Andrew Solomon, who we honored at our benefit, I spoke with him about it. And I said, Andrew, what do you think? And he said something very moving to me, which is that he said, you know, in my book, Noonday Demon, about depression, I share a lot of my personal life with people, and I probably get about 10 emails a day from people who are asking me for advice about their depression.
Wow.
And he said, sometimes it gets to be overwhelming, but then I realize that I'm saving lives. And he said, if your son, by coming out in the newspaper, can express himself in such a way that saves lives, think about how wonderful that will be. And I said that to my son, and he was like, yeah, Ma, sure, I'm happy to do it.
Wow.
And I promised him when I started down this path that his story would not be in the show. My story is in the show, but his story is not. It's the story of other families. And I think that was important for him to feel protected in a way that made him feel safe. But he's very happy now to talk about it, and I'm very proud of him.
The production is 1 part drama, 1 part documentary. It's very raw and real, and it basically follows 6 young troubled teens into the wilderness to learn survival skills as part of the therapeutic process, allowing them to experience and to reflect and to process the feelings. There are many wilderness treatment programs in the United States, and the production of Wilderness that we're talking about tonight is based on real-life clients at Evoke Therapy Programs. It's just outside of St. George, Utah, and if you want to check them out, evoketherapy.com is the website. And again, it weaves together reactions and feelings from the 6 adolescents, portrayed brilliantly by actors, as well as utilizing footage from real-life parents of the adolescents. Talk about that process and putting that piece together.
Well, I got to know these families over 2 years, and as I said, I interviewed them over Skype and recorded those interviews. And we then took those interviews and we edited them down so that excerpts of the different thoughts and feelings of the parents are an integral part of the piece. There's too much entertainment or art out there that's very one-sided, that basically profiles people and says, oh, kids are all evil and screwed up, or parents are all messed up. And we really didn't want to do that. We wanted to present a very complex portrait of family dynamics and of how parents really struggle and want to learn when their children whom they love so much are struggling, and that in order to really be of greatest service to their kids, they need to work on themselves. And then that journey too. I did say when I interviewed the families that I did not want to interview the kids together with the parents, because I knew then that I would get a very different kind of response. So all of the families that agreed to be interviewed also agreed that their children could speak to me separately. I literally didn't meet any of these families until opening night, and they all came to the show and met the actors. So it was the real people meeting the actors who were playing them, and it was an extremely powerful evening.
I can only imagine. How long did it take to put it all together from start to opening night?
It took us 2 years.
Wow.
And that 2 years was about the creative development of the piece. 4 of the 6 actors came from the Pace University Theater Program, 2 of them from NYU. It also took us a long time because we had to do the fundraising necessary, as we're a not-for-profit organization, to support our endeavors with the creative development and production of the show.
Where did the money come from? I assume grants from foundations?
A minimal amount of the money came from grants and foundations. It was mostly individual philanthropy.
Wow.
The foundation community these days is very, very hard to break into because a lot of them are very overwhelmed, I think, with requests. We did get a nice significant grant from the National Endowment for the Arts to work with Pace University on our engagement and outreach component of the show, which is the panel conversations that we've been able to develop, the interactions with different universities and high schools. And we're literally trying to get as many high school and college-age kids through the door before we close on November 20th as possible, because it really can make a difference to have them see how other people are struggling, what they do to work on becoming healthy and well, the kinds of tools they employ, the way they reach out to their peers. Very valuable and rewarding.
Anne Hamburger joining us on Recovery Coast to Coast, executive producer of Wilderness. You can check it out at engardarts.org. It's engardarts.org. It's an amazing production. It simply is too good to be confined to a limited run in a New York City theater. What happens after November 20th? What happens after it closes?
We are going on tour around the country, as I mentioned. We're hoping to be able to make a documentary film so that it can have a future life.
Has any of it been filmed as yet on the stage?
We do have an individual philanthropist who's enabling us to make it, to do a document of the show.
Do you have any cities lined up, and how would people find out about accessing it all around the country?
By going on our Facebook page, which is also On Guard Arts, and we also have Wilderness Documentary Theater Project. We'll be posting the tour route. We will be looking for sponsorship to help us with getting this out to as many communities as possible. We're in negotiations to also have the play published so that it can be produced and with amateur productions in high schools.
Wow.
Which I think is so important to what we're doing, because I would love to see this done in high schools all across America as a way to promote a conversation about these very important issues.
The production is called Wilderness, and as I mentioned at the beginning, I had the great opportunity to see it when I was in New York City. And another thing that really, for me, tied it all together beautifully was the music. Talk about the selection of the music and the artists.
Well, this is a really wonderful story, actually, which is that we were out at Evoke Therapy doing our field research, as I said, the summer before last. And there was a field guide who was singing, who had a beautiful, beautiful voice. And I said to her, "Are you a singer?" And she said, "Well, no, not professionally. I just sing because I love it." And I said, "What's your favorite song?" And she said, "My favorite song is Vanilla Pines by The Towers." And she started singing that song.
Wow.
And I said, "Oh, my God, we have to use that song in our show." And so we reached out to The Towers and said, "Can we use your music?" And they let us use a couple of their songs, plus they wrote original songs. And then Brad Reedy introduced me to the composer Kyle Henderson, who's a Salt Lake City-based performer and composer who wrote several original songs for us. So what's so wonderful about the music, which really is very beautiful folk rock music, is that it came out of the investigative process that we employed to develop the piece. So it was very organic to our research.
An absolutely amazing production. I am so delighted that I had a chance to see it. And when we find out more information about where it's going to be around the country, I want to share that with our listeners around the country as well. If you happen to be in New York and you're there between now and the 20th of November, this is a do not miss production. It's called Wilderness, and again, you can go to the engardarts.org website and find out a whole lot more. And I salute you for what you've done, for your bravery, for your compassion, and for your generosity of spirit.
Well, thank you so much.
I'm Neil Scott. The program is Recovery Coast to Coast. We'll continue with more right after this short time out.